Hey everyone, it's Pat Keegan and welcome back to the DIY Home Built channel. This is the second video in our built-in fireplace surround video series that we're creating for you, and I put this video together for two reasons. The first reason really is because most of the project, or a lot of the project, was spent building this fireplace mantle, and a lot of that footage got basically corrupted and lost. So I wanted to take some time to talk about that on the build. And we are going to be doing another fireplace mantle coming up soon, so you'll be able to see it. I mean, we have lots of projects we're going to be doing, so I'm not really, I'm upset and frustrated that we lost the video footage because it was some good stuff, but we've always got a lot more videos coming up, so hopefully you can catch it from there. The other reason I wanted to put this video together was simply because I've said many times in previous videos and in on our blog and in comments or responses to comments on our website and on our YouTube channel that a project like this can appear very, very daunting at first, especially to a beginner or even somebody who has some good woodworking skills but maybe hasn't tackled a project like this in their own home before. And so these things can appear often very complex. The devil is in the details, literally, but it can appear very complex and initially look very daunting of a task. But as I've said before in the videos and everything, I've repeated before, I'll say it again, I'm probably going to never stop saying it, is if you can break down a project like this into subcomponents and then break those subcomponents down into smaller and smaller pieces until those pieces become manageable, then you can just build those pieces back up again until you have the complex project and fully created. And I'm a firm believer in that, and sometimes it just helps to see somebody walk through that, so I'm going to walk you through that today. And in seeing that, maybe you can start to think of it in your own way for your own projects. So immediately you can see here what I've got is a quick and dirty SketchUp I made of the design of the project. It's not complete or 100% accurate, so forgive the detail there, but you're going to get the point here as we go through the video. When I see a project like this, or I see a blank wall and somebody wants built-ins around a fireplace, I immediately break it up into three sections. I've got my left section here, my right section here, and the center section, which is going to contain the mantle. And even then, I break it up further into three more sections. So each section has a lower base cabinet and an upper bookcase. Here's a lower base cabinet and an upper bookcase. And even in the mantle section, I've really got a lower mantle and an upper mantle. And you can count the shelf as part of either one if you want. I counted it as part of the upper section here for the purposes of this design, actually. And so if you've watched the kitchen video series that we did, you can actually now start, I think, to relate more to a simple cabinet, one simple cabinet, or a simple face frame, or even a cabinet carcass. And so that is in part how I'm going to take you through this. Is once you break this thing up, you can break it down into its smaller pieces and then start building those smaller pieces until they all come together. So let me do that and go through, start at the beginning here. And what I'm going to start with is pretty much a blank slate. The walls and the fireplace with its stone and the mantle shelf. It's got another stone mantle shelf attached to it. And so you can immediately see that I've built two pretty simple base cabinets with, just made of plywood. Everything right now is made of plywood. And you're going to see by watching, I think, this video that it's going to help you relate to the construction of these cabinets when I show you that in subsequent videos, starting with the very next video, actually. So in any case, the base cabinet is really just made up of, a side, a bottom, another side, a couple of stretchers across the top, and a nailing cleat in the back. You can see that kind of here. And that's going to be what we screw through into the studs in the walls to anchor the base cabinet to the wall and get everything, structurally have structural integrity so that we can mount the bookcases on them and everything else. So you can see, you know, if you've toyed around making some of these carcasses before, not very difficult. It's just a few pieces of plywood cut to the right dimensions. And what makes these cabinets a little bit simpler is the base cabinets don't have a back to them. The client, as I mentioned in the previous video, wanted to save a little bit of money and didn't want to put the backs on there. I've done lots of base cabinets in this configuration without a back on them. It makes the electrical easier to get at. You don't have to do any real special access to that. And it makes a whole lot of other problems go away, and nobody sees the back when the doors are closed. And if you paint the you know, inside back wall of the cabinets you know, a good color or whatever to match, then it's really, you won't even see it, you know. So in any case, you've seen this stuff on our website before or on our channel before. So let me go ahead and add, oh, one thing I wanted to point out here is, in addition to the pieces to the actual cabinet, if I zoom in here, you can see there's this extra piece of plywood. Well, this just represents the panel that I'm going to be adding to this plywood box after I install the face frame. The face frames in this project are going to be essentially 2.5 inches wide, and so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to add some spacers onto this side of the cabinet and then nail this panel onto those spacers, or through those spacers into the actual side. And so what I'm creating here is a dimension that's essentially 2 inches. Hopefully you can see that, the little 2 inch mark or whatever. And since that's 2.5 inches, I always want a 1/2 inch reveal, um, or I want the face frame to extend into the cabinet, or past the cabinet sidewall about a 1/2 inch, so that I don't pull out any shelves that I have in there. That's just kind of a standard practice. You want shelves generally to be locked behind a face frame, and in order to do that, I put a 1/2 inch. I build them 1/2 inch wider than each dimension of the side. So for example, you know, two pieces of plywood put together is 1.5 inches. So if I have a 2.5 inch face frame, I'm going to come a 1/2 inch this way and a 1/2 inch this way, and I'm going to satisfy my 1/2 inch reveal. So let's go ahead and add those face frames so that you can actually see them. So now you see it gets a little bit more complicated, but still we've made you're going to see how we construct the face frames. Again, if you watched the kitchen videos before, this is going to be kind of old news to you, but you know, this face frame is simply 5 pieces of 1x3 stock. 1x3 is actually 3/4 by 2.5, and so put together using pocket hole joinery, and again attached to the cabinet. Now you'll see, once I offset those things, the cabinet here is, the panel on the side of the cabinet is going to be flush. Because this side here is actually facing a wall, which I didn't draw the walls, I don't need to have an extra panel here. I can just let this face frame hang long. And in fact, I really want to do that because one thing I want to point out on the face frame is, since I'm going to be scribing, which is basically a technique by which I place the cabinet against the wall, and with a pencil I draw the contour of the wall onto this piece of wood here, and then I sand that wood up to the line, my pencil lines, and what that's going to allow me to do is actually fit that face frame so snugly against the wall that you won't see any gaps. If I just had a flat piece of wood and I put it against the wall, chances are they're going to have some visible gaps, which I don't really want. So one of the things that I do in preparation to that, and I'll talk about more about this in the construction video, so I won't belabor the point, is I cut a back bevel here. You can kind of see how, this is like a 45 degree, anywhere between a 30 and a 45 degree angle, and you can see that the reason I do that is because, let's say I scribe the wall and I have to take off this much of the edge. You know, I have to take off all this, you know, material in here. Well, you can see that if I have just a regular piece of 1x3 here, that I would have to sand down or grind down all of this material in here. by back beveling, I only have to sand off this material in here, this tiny little triangle of material from the wood. I don't have to get all this, grind all this big thick piece down. So that's really the purpose of back beveling, is so that I can, come back later and scribe much more easily than I would be able to normally. And again, we'll talk about that in the construction portion of the video. Those are some of the what I mean by the devil's in the details. Some of these things are little tricks of the trade that you want to learn if you can. So let's go ahead and go to the next one where I add the countertops. So again, countertops in this particular instance are just a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood cut to the exact dimension of the cabinet. And we are going to hide the ugly plywood seam like that is on the edge of this plywood board, and cover the seam between the counter and the upper rail here by putting a piece of 1 1/4 inch trim all the way wrapped around from the wall here all the way around until it hits the mantle over here on the other side. So don't worry about that. That'll all be covered, and that's basic trim work. Let's see. So if we go to the next one, now we see where my carcasses for the bookcases come in place. So the lower cabinets are essentially done except for the doors, which we'll be ordering in this case. And now I've built my carcasses for the upper bookcases. Again, very simple carcasses. This one has 3 pieces. It doesn't even have 4. And it's got still the same extra panel on the right side that we're going to be doing. And again, a piece of trim will cover all this in here, so you won't see that. But you can see how very simple it is. The only difference between the upper bookcase and the lower base cabinet is that the upper bookcase will have a back on it. But unlike the kitchen cabinet videos, the kitchen cabinets that we build in the previous set of videos for that project, the cabinet back here is going to be simply a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood, or a couple of sheets actually, because this is wider than 48 inches. So we'll cut a couple of pieces and we'll glue and crown nail these on the back, to basically make the cabinets, the backs of the cabinets. And it's very sturdy. There's a vent up here we're going to have to cut a hole from. Normally I like to use 3/4 inches on the back of material, but again, we're trying to save a little bit of money, and we've got ductwork behind it, and I'm a little bit limited on the space here that I can achieve. So again, that all helps with all 3 of those facets. So we worked with our client and we decided to go with the 1/4 inch backs instead. So again, now I'll add the face frame, and you can see again, it's starting to really come together, and all I've really done is I've built a few plywood boxes and I've put together some face frames in the traditional way that we do face frames, which is through pocket hole joinery. So a couple things. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, can't edit that out. A couple of things that I want to talk about with these face frames are the left side here and the right side here are also back beveled in order to scribe to the wall. Scribing is an alternative to using a piece of trim or something to hide the gap. I think scribing is like the most elegant way to do it, although there are different solutions. If the gap is really small, I could just caulk, run a bead of caulk through here. That's totally fine too if you're going to be painting the walls and the bookcases. These bookcases are going to be painted, but we don't want to necessarily, paint all the walls either, so we're going to scribe everything. You'll also notice that these have a little bit delicate feature here of an arch. They like the arch look, so we put some arches in there. I'm going to do 2 videos, one on, I think, or maybe 1 video. I have footage recorded that I'm going to show you on how to make your own jig to allow yourself to make these arches. And there's a little trick to it, but in my opinion, the best way to do arches like this is with a router. If you try to cut them with a jigsaw or a bandsaw even and sand them down, it just takes forever to get them to look right. And it's very hard, difficult to make them look very smooth, like they were made out of a machine or a factory, something like that. So I'll show you how to build a template and create these arches using a router. Okay, let's see. So now let's talk about the mantle. I do want to spend some time here. because this is the part that you won't get to see, but again is still relatively straightforward. The first thing requirement we had was a little bit of a constraint. We could not drill through this stone or glue to it using construction adhesive of any kind. The client, for whatever reason, wanted to keep this fireplace pretty much intact. And that could be because maybe they want to change the brick one day and I can come back and I can remove the mantle and they can redo the brick, something like that. The other constraint we had is, although not shown here, there's an area here that has some slots cut into the mortar so that some of the heat from the fireplace can come out and heat the room, providing some kind of energy efficiency when they have a fire in the fireplace. So we had to be mindful of that. So the first thing we did was we basically decided that, we've got to frame out this area to receive the plywood skin. Not unlike framing a wall to receive drywall, we added some framing here to receive some plywood to start making our mantle. So you can see on the upper section of the mantle, we just framed a little thin wall, and really all that was needed was, because these pieces fit snugly between this stone mantle shelf and the ceiling, we just screwed into the sides of the bookcases, and that's really all that's needed. The mantle shelf is sufficient with those screws to take the weight of the plywood and the television that gets mounted to it. So it's a very simple wall. The only other pieces of plywood we added here, I mean, not plywood, the only other studs we added was a little bit in, you can see here, the studs are a little bit in front of the mantle shelf. And they're just attached to the sides of the bookcases with pocket screws. I'm telling you, if you ever have to do this, if you drill the right screw, and a lot of people have had some questions, so I did send that out an email, or like kind of our monthly email, I guess. And I posted it on our Facebook page. There's a different size screw chart for drilling through one, with your pocket holes, when you're drilling through a 2x4 as opposed to like a 1x4 or something like that. So in any case, I attached this strictly to the side there, with and it was resting on the floor, and attaching it pretty much with pocket screws, and it's very strong. I could not wiggle or bend that 2x4 out of place to save my life. So very strong, joinery all in all. So that's it for creating the frame. Now let's add the plywood mantle, or the plywood skin up here, and the two pieces of plywood I used to create the shelf. Okay, so the first thing you're going to probably notice is there's a gap here, and that was done deliberately because I need air to be able to get up behind this piece of plywood in a convection way, so that I can carry that heat out of a vent that we're installing up in this area here, so that it doesn't, cook back there, the plywood and everything like that. So so the plywood is, comes close to this ledge, but, obviously there's a gap behind it. Then there's two pieces of plywood that I used to create the mantle shelf, because I wanted something that was going to be 1.5 inches thick. The first piece here, there's actually pocket holes all along this edge, and a couple of pocket holes at the end, at each end. And obviously I screwed each end into the bookcase, and I screwed this edge into the back piece of plywood. And then the second piece of plywood I just laid on top and screwed down, and nailed down with some brad nails that I filled in with wood filler. So that pretty much makes the field that we're going to be using to attach some trim later on to really make this mantle look really good. The next piece that we have to do is the lower mantle, and again, this lower mantle comes right up to over the edge of the wood, because it's sitting on these pieces of 2x4 that are actually sticking out. And again, I'm going to draw these lines here because it helps you visualize. This mantle piece here, only 3 pieces of plywood. I've got the freeze board really up here, and then the 2 leg pieces. And behind the scenes, behind this piece, these are used, again, pocket hole joinery, or you could use biscuits if you want to, but I pretty much solely use pocket hole joinery right now for this type of stuff. And so these are joined on the back side with pocket holes, such that the three pieces become one piece. And then they're simply nailed into place against the upper pieces of wood here and the side pieces of wood that I put together, um, that I attached the 2x4s to the side of the cabinet. The other place where I had ended up attaching them was through pocket holes drilled up into this shelf. And the reason I put the pocket holes here on the front was because I'm going to be covering that with a piece of trim and they're not going to be visible. So this creates now the basic mantle structure that we've got. The only thing remaining at this point, which is probably the simplest of this entire project, is just to dress up the mantle with some trim, and I'll walk through that in just a second here. So essentially the trim breakdown goes as follows. I created a 1x4 face frame here to create this kind of visual difference, or a visual flat panel um, artifact up here on the upper side of the mantle. And what's not listed here or shown here because of time was I did install a piece of trim along the built-in, and I'm going to get some pictures up so that you can see. So I put some interior trim along this edge all the way around to really give it a picture frame appearance. I also added, although not visible here, just a straight piece of trim across to cover these edges of plywood. It was a 1.5 inch piece of trim, that we applied to the front. The next piece was a piece of crown molding that goes right under that. One thing you have to keep in mind too is, although I didn't do a good job showing it here because I created this in a little bit of a hurry, was this block of wood up here actually sits flush with the underside of this piece of crown molding. And actually what I didn't draw here is there's a piece of wood that runs all the way across the front of this freeze board, that you can nail the piece of crown molding to, and it's 1 inch wide, so that it takes this block here, which is also 1 inch wide, and it butts up right against it. I might come back and do another one like this so you can see it a little bit better. Um, but in any case, you've got your upper face frame, the interior trim, the picture molding, if you will, picture frame molding. You've got some more picture frame molding down here. It's just a square. It's not flat and rectangular like it looks here. It's actually an elegant piece of trim molding here that's attached to the front. And then I've got an upper block, a lower block, and a leg here. This is called the plinth block down here. And so one thing that you'll notice is I made the 4 corner blocks out of 5/4 inch material, which is 1 inch thick. And so this leg board on the contrary is a 1x6 piece of wood, so it's only 3/4 of an inch thick. So this is going to leave a 1/4 inch gap, or a 1/4 inch reveal all along this bottom edge. And that was done deliberately because, again, what's not drawn here yet is that there's trim that goes around each of these sections where the leg 1x4 meets the blocks, which are 5/4 lumber or 1 inch thick. So wherever the 3/4 inch lumber meets the 1 inch lumber, I've put in pieces of trim and wrapped those with pieces of trim that are designed for that application. So they have a 1/4 inch groove in the channel. And I really wish I had not, lost that footage, or made it corrupt. I don't know what I did to do it, but and in any case, that pretty much finishes the design. So I hope, in the detailed view walkthrough of that design, so I hope you can really see that if you just break things up into its pieces, and you break it up further and further, that you really can start to understand how these things go together, and it makes you less afraid or less intimidated to try a project like this. Even if you have some decent skills, you might not have just done a project of this magnitude before. That if I've told you before, if you can measure and mark and cut, which is a skill building video that I put out, if you can learn how to do that very well, there's really not much that, in my opinion, is out of your reach. You just have to have some practice with it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. Go ahead and post any questions you have below the video. I'll certainly try my best to answer them. And then the next video in the series that'll be out very soon here is going to start the actual construction process. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.